Good day, all. I want to say thank you for taking your time out to join today's very special press conference.
It was a busy schedule in the NBA on Wednesday night.
Today's press conference is focused on the ICC Men's T20 World Cup review. Present today, we have the president of Cricket West Indies, Mr. Ricky Skerritt. Also, we have the chairman of the committee that was charged with the task of doing that review, Justice Patrick Thompson, who is a High Court judge of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. We welcome both the president and Justice Thompson to this press conference, and we thank them for taking their time out to speak with the media. As well as an organization, Cricket West Indies would like to thank all of the media that have taken your time to be here this afternoon. Without much further ado, I'm going to hand over to the president, who is going to give some brief opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Dario, and good afternoon to all of you who have joined us for this press conference. I think you call it these days, media conference, press briefing, all of the above. It's really a pleasure to have with me to kind of introduce to you a young man who has been of yeoman service in the last few weeks to West Indies cricket. Justice Patrick Thompson has been chairing a review group that Cricket West Indies appointed a few weeks back, you would recall, to take a very in-depth look at matters related to our preparation and performance in the 2022 World Cup. There was very good reason for doing that. The whole Caribbean was in agony and in distress and in disappointment, and it clearly indicated that there was something massively wrong, even though based on what had built up over the last few years, I don't think that anybody could have seriously expected us to go all the way, but certainly there was no reason why we should not have, and that was the view of the general public and also within CWI, that we needed to get to the bottom of this and see where have we been missing in action, where is it that we needed to do some things differently, and what is it we could learn from those who had participated. You know, the problem with Cricket West Indies, in at least one of the problems, because there have been many, is that we have not really built up a learning culture. And we have done things the best we could at the time, in many cases, just fighting fires and surviving and hoping for the best, knowing that there really was not enough invested into the requirements for global success. But I want to then say to you that this report has been made public. The entire report will be made public sooner rather than later, but the key points of it in an executive summary and the recommendations were put before you earlier today, and I hope you've had a chance to read it. It's a very readable document, and if you haven't, I think you need to read it as soon as possible, and hopefully you can get some more insight into the report itself from the man who chaired the distinguished group that produced this report, namely Justice Thompson, who is with you today, Brian Lara, who needs no references, and Mickey Arthur, who is also well known internationally as a South African coach. Unfortunately, Mickey and Brian couldn't be with us. They're in different time zones. And but I'm extremely grateful for the tremendous work done and for the panel's valuable time given to this review. It included dozens of interviews of players, coaches, administrators, directors, and other stakeholders. This report will be a must-read for all in our cricket system, for all of our cricket leadership. And the board has already begun looking at it to see where the board has to mobilize to help to implement the 34 recommendations that lie therein. On Tuesday afternoon, we held an executive committee meeting of the board, and Justice Thompson made his presentation to us. That was the first step of several steps going forward. But let me take this opportunity to invite Justice Thompson to give you some perspective, to introduce himself to you, and to tell you what I hope will be very interesting and useful information for you and for all of us going forward. Patrick?
Thank you so much, Ricky. I hope you don't mind me calling you that. I have to say, this is a real honor and privilege to be here. I have to say, I don't have much insight orally for you. I'm more interested, I suppose, in any questions that you have for me, since I suppose I prefer to let my written words speak for me, because that's what I do in my day job. So I guess I'll turn over to you, Mr. Moderator, and you'll tell me whose questions, if any, will take first.
Well, I see that quite a few people are familiar with the style of our press conferences and have already begun to raise their hands in the Zoom group chat. But I want to encourage all journalists who do have questions prepared for either the Justice or for President Skerritt to please raise your hand in the Zoom group chat. That'll give me a good indication of just how many questions we'll be fielding and how long we'll be on this or within this press conference. At the initial stages, I'm going to limit it to 2 questions per journalist. You're allowed a follow-up on each of those 2 questions if it's necessary. And the first raised hand that I'm seeing this afternoon is Brandon Corlett. Brandon, please proceed.
Hi, good afternoon, all. A very important topic before the World Cup was the missed flight of Shimron Hetmyer.
5:45.
Someone came in there. Please mute them, Dario. Yeah, so my question is surrounded about Shimron Hetmyer and his missed flight. I would like to know what's the conversation with Hetmyer and CW. Not the direct conversation, but the plans for Shimron Hetmyer as a West Indies cricketer.
Right. Well,
Brandon, I don't think that the Justice would be best placed to answer such a question. This session is strictly meant to focus on the ICC T20 World Cup review. And while that is a part of what would have happened during the T20 World Cup or during that phase, we want to look at the document itself, the findings that would have come out of it, and the recommendations that were made. So I'm not sure that at any point in time, the Justice will be equipped to answer such a question in terms of what happens going forward with Shimron Hetmyer.
Although, to be fair, Mr. Bartley, and I think just so you know, it's referenced at recommendation number 5. There is a reference to who we say Cricket West Indies ought to have discussions with. Brandon, I'm sure you'd appreciate that I'm not in a position to see what will be the outcome of those discussions. But certainly we believe, and it's also something you will see in the full report, we believe that Cricket West Indies ought to encourage ongoing dialogue with Mr. Hetmyer as to the role that they would like him to play in their operations going forward. What happens, of course, is a matter for Cricket West Indies and its directors and its cricket people, and of course, its incoming president in the fullness of time. But certainly for our part, as part of our review, we felt that there ought to at least be some conversation and a structured and honest conversation with Mr. Hetmyer and with Cricket West Indies, with honesty on both sides, so that we can chart a way forward with him. What happens as a result is an open question. I hope I've answered your question, Brandon.
Thanks a lot. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Brandon, that was your only question?
Yes, that's all, Dario. Thank you.
No problem. Sajil from ICA Sports.
Thank you very much. This is Sajil from ICA Sports. My question would be to both of the gentlemen, actually. So I can see that the suggestion it has been found that the lack of familiarization to the conditions was one of the major issues. So my question is in that regards that would we see more in future because the next World Cup is in West Indies anyway, but in future when there would be World Cups abroad, would we see more players playing in the leagues, and would players like we've seen with Ireland, they've given permission to play to some of their players to play leagues over the international cricket? Would that be something that we would be seeing to see the players get acclimatization to the conditions to avoid such things in the future?
Right. That's
yeah. Sure, go ahead. Go ahead, Judge.
That's a good question, Sajil, I have to say. That again is a matter that no doubt will be resolved in the fullness of time, because of course we'd appreciate a lot depends on the players and their availability. And of course, familiarization depends on the conditions that you're going into, so that there may be less scope. And I think that's a point we try to make in the report. The familiarization was necessary because of the contrast between West Indian conditions and the conditions they came upon in Australia. I suspect there'd be less scope or need for familiarization if they were playing, say, in Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, places that we tour fairly frequently, and they play a lot of league cricket there in any event. But I will say, Cricket West Indies, as part of this, there has to be a greater conversation between the players and Cricket West Indies going forward, so that there can be greater agreement between all sides as to exactly what is needed long in advance of any particular tournament. Whether the players will play more league cricket is entirely a matter for them and, of course, for Cricket West Indies. I suspect that that's as far as my answer could go, but no doubt Ricky may have a more fulsome answer to add to that.
Well, yeah, just to say that it is in fact a desired aspired situation. Ideally, we should get optimum acclimatization. The reality is that what compounded this situation was that not only was there no significant amount of time for acclimatizing it. The players had just come from playing actively and strenuously in the Caribbean Professional League in a completely different environment, and got there with very, very little time to acclimatize. Acclimatization involves both off the field and on the field. Players travel so much these days that off the field is not as difficult, but jet lag is a significant medical phenomenon that could affect performance. However, players are learning to adapt very, very quickly in terms of their sleep patterns and so on. The issue is really the types of cricket environments, the pitches and so on. So you need to get some simulated preparation. I mean, right now, we're already doing it. We've been doing it with the women's team more recently. We did it with the women in the last World Cup in New Zealand, and the women did very, very well as a result. We have our women's team in South Africa right now, playing in a triangular series that began today. They will be playing within the next couple of days, a triangular series with India, South Africa, and West Indies in South Africa, where we are going to go on to play in the World Cup. World Cups are happening with women as well, and of course with youth, with girls for the first time right now, and boys. So it's a tremendous amount of work involved, preparation, investment, camps, both at home and abroad. But it has to be done. The problem with the men is the windows of opportunity are extremely tight. There's just so much cricket. And I mean, even to get the CPL in so that we can get the best players available, especially coming out of the pandemic. The pandemic caused a pileup, a sort of backup of deferred matches and leagues and bilateral tours that brought a peculiarly difficult situation this time around.
Thank you very much. Just a follow-up question. I've seen that there has been a recommendation that the white ball players should play more red ball cricket. However, I wanted to ask that going forward, we've seen from different countries around the world, India doing it, Pakistan has hinted at it, and then Australia also has a few players. Would it be better to have a team separate for red ball, or two sides for red ball and white ball with a few players who play both? Or would this help in order for the workload management as well? And then in order to, as you mentioned as well, in order to get players to go to different leagues as well and acclimatize themselves?
Right. That's a fair question, Sajil. And again, I think that's something that we deal with both in a more fulsome way in the report, which you'll see, but also in the recommendations. I think if you look at recommendation number 1, actually, which says, look, identify a core squad. The aim of that recommendation is to sort of identify a core squad, because we have a smaller pool. We're not like India or Pakistan that have thousands of first-class cricketers, or first-class cricketers number in the hundreds. So that you have to identify a pool of your best players and manage them with a view to ensuring, as best as you can, that your best 11 takes the field in each match, red or white ball, because Cricket West Indies can't afford the reputational hit that will come from poor performance, whether red or white ball. I think that is what our report has recommended, and that is what we hope to see in the future. How that will be implemented, no doubt, is a matter for the future.
Roger C. Prasad, who will be followed by Jerome Foster.
Thanks, Dario. Good afternoon, all. My question is for Mr. Skerritt. Just concerning the committee mentioned that or they recognize the importance of governance reform. And I just want to get an update from you in terms of the web report, which was brought to the board last year, I believe. What is the stage that has reached in terms of the recommendations for governance reform?
We don't have enough time to get into this in this forum, but governance reform began when I became president. Our first area of reform began with financial systems reform. We did a situation analysis, and through a report put together by PKF, formerly known as Panelka Foster, and the 28 recommendations of that report, which included some significant financial accounting and transparency policies, have been carried out. 28 recommendations, all signed off just recently with the use of a monitoring consultant and a completely reformed financial system, a new CFO, etc. What you are speaking about is the Webby report that speaks more to board governance reform. And you know that follows many other reports, some of which were a little bit more researched than others. I'm happy to report that we've been working really hard to try to, what makes that governance system difficult to change is that you have to get resolutions passed in special general meetings or at the annual general meeting. We have an annual general meeting coming up at the end of March when we hand over operations to new leadership and so on. And it is my intention to bring a number of I think, what I would call low-hanging fruits within the Webby report to that annual general meeting for approval. We've done a fair amount of work. We had a committee, a special committee internally done to review the Webby report and see where we could get positive feedback from the territorial boards, because really it's up to the territorial boards. They're the ones voting. If the territorial boards don't vote in the majority for the resolutions that come out of the Webby report, then no changes will happen. But we are confident that we have been able to merge some of them, adjust some of them, with ultimately getting the same outcomes. And so I'm hoping, I'm very, very positive, but I'm not unrealistic of the politics involved. And I'm hoping that by the end of March, we should get some significant recommendations passed through the annual general meeting.
Thank you.
Jerome, you're up.
Okay. Afternoon, Sir Skerritt and Justice Thompson. Mr. Skerritt. You're not hearing me. Oh, can I go again? Yeah.
Yeah, we
You hear me now? Yeah. Afternoon again. Sir Skerritt, in terms of the implementation of the recommendations, I know that you have already indicated that you won't be around for the next 2 years or the next cycle of presidency. But in terms of implementing these plans, the first one, in terms of getting the 30 to 35 players to form a core for the next World Cup, I think that is the thing that stands out at us. Is it that the selectors have been told to do this already, or it's part of the framework? How quickly will these recommendations be implemented? The short term, before I get to the others.
The selectors are already looking at a core group. Let me say that. Whether the core group is 30 people or not will come later in an announcement. But you know, when you put a core group in place, you do it very strategically and you invest in it, and you make sure, as the chairman said, that you can get their time put into work in preparation for West Indies team performance. But it's practically impossible to get access to those 30 on an ongoing basis. I mean, you can't exactly pull a camp with the 30 players and be sure that you're going to have all of them there for many, many weeks at a time. So one has to be very strategic, and the conversations are happening already. And the Future Tours program, the good thing is, I don't know if you understand what the Future Tours program is, but the Future Tours program is the ICC program for bilateral cricket. And that has now been set for the first time coming out of the pandemic for a few years ahead. So you have a rough idea. We are much better suited now to plan. Planning ahead is difficult if there's so much uncertainty and lack of information ahead, and so much conflict that jumps on you last minute. But we're in a much better state to plan that kind of activity. And the selectors are included now in all of strategic planning, all aspects to do with cricket. What I call the cricket system and the cricket leadership involves the selectors now. The selectors are not sitting out there in a bubble, sort of as kingmakers, like it kind of used to be once ago. They have to be accountable, they have to be transparent, and they have to be communicating with the players and with other colleagues and partners within the system.
Just one more for you, Mr. Skerritt, before I ask Justice Thompson a question. The medium-term recommendation, I think it's the 12th one, the 5th one for the medium term. It says that a regional T20 tournament is fundamental to identify and developing players. So technically, is it that the CPL is not good enough, or is there a space where we can find another regional tournament? Because you already lamented
I think that's a question that the judge can the judge can tell you what they were thinking when they said that, and I can tell you where we are with it.
All right, no
Justice?
problem.
Sorry. Yes. No, we weren't offering any critiques of the CPL. It's very simple, I think. All players need to play as much cricket as possible. India and Pakistan, even though they have the IPL and the PSL, also still maintain their domestic T20 leagues. So it is hoped that Cricket West Indies could somehow accommodate a sort of local T20 league to spot and allow talent, if spotted in the way that we planned, to have a forum to display their talents, so that you have a pipeline for spotting and identifying prospective West Indies players, so they could develop into the sorts of players that we hope to see in the fullness of time. That I guess is a long-winded way of explaining what is a very short recommendation there.
Well,
Yeah,
the other thing with it, if I could just say, is that it will give you an opportunity to pull through some talent that may not get quickly into CPL. In CPL, that is why we have the Emerging Players Program with CPL. Well embedded now. It's something we started just after I became president, and we continued it when the CPL took place each time. We now preparing the emerging players. We have an emerging players camp that actively prepares for a number of outings, including the CPL. So the idea is to get more talent into our T20 team and all of our teams. We have our own ODI program. We have our own first championship program in first class cricket. So why not have our own T20 program? And that's what the discussions are taking place. It has to do with money. It has to do with the territorial boards, because essentially it's an inter franchise tournament. The franchises have that scope to do, bilateral type arrangements. Some of it is beginning to happen. There's nothing wrong with Trinidad arranging a friendly match against Guyana and so on, to get the youngsters playing and so on. But it is a good idea. One of the ideas that has been discussed is, can we attach it on to the championship so that you play both first class cricket and the same players play some T20 cricket either the last day, that day in that particular venue and so on. But I can tell you there's active, creative thinking taking place across the region about this, and I believe it won't be long before you see such a league.
All right, no problem. One final one for the justice. In terms of your consultations with the former players, you've said that there's a lack of trust between, well, the report said that there's a lack of trust between the players and the administration, and that transparency and accountability is lacking at the territorial level. Well, can you just elaborate on those things as to what are some of the problems that these former players are having? Muted.
You'll have to give me the reference, transparency and accountability lacking at the territorial level. I certainly don't recall finding that as a fact for this purpose. But
The territorial board.
Yeah, you'll have to direct me to exactly where I said that is a deficiency. I think we say we need to see more of it, and that's tied to governance. But this report wasn't directed at finding as a fact that transparency and accountability needed work. But insofar as the lack of trust by the players, I think it's just more a lack of trust and confidence. They may have felt, and I think we made it clear in the report, whether rightly or wrongly, that there's this inherent tension between employers and employee, and that is the nature of the trust. I cannot, of course, because these were confidential consultations, I cannot in this forum simply say player A or player B had a particular grouse with administrator X or Y. That'd be wholly inappropriate. What I can say though is that it is the sort of tension that is inherent in any employer-employee relationship, and that sort of tension is magnified when you're in sports, and it's even more magnified in any sporting arena when your team loses. That really is all it boils down to.
Yeah, thanks again. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Junior Codlin, who will be followed by Marshall Hewitt. But before you guys begin, I just do want to acknowledge the presence of the CWI Vice President, Dr. Kishore Shallow, who is a part of this press conference. Junior, you can go ahead.
President, good afternoon. Justice, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
President, question to you. How confident or how determined are you to see this report by the learned justice be implemented before you leave office?
One word I can give you is very, very, well, it's the same word repeated, very. The PKF report, which was presented to us at the end of 2019, we had commissioned it in August 2019. Every single recommendation has been implemented. This report, which in my opinion will form one of the pillars of reform within Cricket West Indies, is so important because it's never been done before. There's never been a thorough review of our cricket system, an independent review, focusing on the cricket system itself and taking it back up to connect with leadership and the board and so on. This report, if you read this report, you will see what a comprehensive and clinical style it brings to solution, to providing solutions. And I can tell you, it has already been designated as must read for all of our cricket leadership. It's already in the board. It's been circulated through the board. And I made it clear to the board when we called for it that it will have to be a public document. Now, somebody said to me, well, the Webby report was put out in the public as well, and you haven't implemented it. I already explained the difference. This report is strictly management to a large extent. Is probably 80 to, I haven't done a full analysis of it myself. I'm still reading it on the 5th read right now. But it is implementable, very implementable, without massive amounts of new investment. We're already investing. It is a question of fine-tuning some of the investments. But there are some board issues that relates to it. For example, it speaks to, and I'll let the justice tell you more about that, because I think that's an issue which is being debated. Do you have a different white ball coach to a red ball coach, etc.? Those are decisions that ultimately the board makes based on cricket requirements, stroke, cost. So, it's like, you and your wife decide you need to buy a new car. You're hoping you could get a Mercedes, but the budget could only buy, a much smaller brand. So sometimes you're limited with what you can do because of what you have. But I think it's a great opportunity for the justice to tell you a little bit about their thinking and where they went to in that, because that's a simple example of what kinds of decisions have to be kicked upstairs to the board.
Absolutely. And President, as you get ready to leave office, if you reflect on these tournaments that gone by that our team participate in and what has gone on in the tours gone by, how do you reflect? We know that your intentions was good and you were constrained by many things that are not made public, but do you feel satisfied that you have done everything in your power to move West Indies cricket forward?
Look, the short answer to that is yes. However, I really don't want us to discuss me today. I want us to discuss this report which was a report I called for, and that's why I'm here, because I'm very, very proud of what this report is producing in terms of the way forward for West Indies cricket. You know, a lot has happened in the almost 4 years that I've been president. We've had massive challenges and we've made big progress at the right time. I will have a press conference and I will be happy to answer more questions specific to my own leadership and the effectiveness of Cricket West Indies leadership in general in the last 4 years. But today is about what are we going to do to learn from. It's about learning from what took place and making good decisions to improve our performances going forward. And this is a landmark document, which is a must read. Simple as it is, a lot of the contents are not entirely new, but it's a synopsis, which was much needed in West Indies cricket. And it's a foundation on which we can build. So I thank again the Justice for doing this, but this is not about me right now. This is about where we are and where we need to go. And in cricket sense, this gives a very clear pathway of some of the decisions and actions that can make a difference based on what has been learned. This is not the judge sitting down and writing you know, an epistle and giving it to us. This is about a significant amount of feedback and research and analysis going into what you now have before you and keeping it as simple as possible so that everybody can read it and understand. Justice, help me out here.
I'm not sure there's much I can add to that. Perhaps Mr. Codling would tell me some more about, I guess, the areas on the cricket side of the report, and I could chime in on anything. Certainly, Ricky, you've given a really accurate summary as to what the report was aimed to do and why I guess it took so long to be produced, because we had to consult with a whole host of persons. I say in jest, the only persons we didn't consult with were the umpires. And that was just an oversight. From groundsman to CEO was able to have a stake, because it shows the broad scope and range of the factors that influence and go into ensuring that the 11 players on the field are, I guess, truly representative of the people that they represent. So Mr. Codling, perhaps you had a follow-up question that I can assist you with?
When I, just a comment, Justice, my final words, you know, I read the report and it was well done. I must agree with the president on this. It was well done, well put together. And on behalf of the entire Caribbean, I want to thank you and the president for doing such a thing like this. And I know the cricketing public, which I represent, will be absolutely thrilled to see it come to pass.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that, Mr. Codling. I'm happy to hear that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Junior. The final raised hand that I'm seeing is Marshall Hewitt. However, we are willing to take one other round of questions if someone would have thought of one within that time. So Marshall, I'm going to ask you to proceed. And if no further raised hands thereafter, then we would look to end today's engagement.
Thank you, Dario. Just one each, one for Ricky and one for Justice Thompson as well. Ricky, if I start with you, when I read through a lot of the report, I kind of got the sense that for a lot of these changes to happen, the territorial boards are going to have to, for want of a better expression, play ball. And they're going to have to want to implement a lot of these things. And I guess I just want an understanding of how difficult is that in reality to get all of these. You spoke about how the Webby report needs essentially directors on the boards to want to play ball in that sense. Are you expecting a similar kind of difficulty in getting some of these recommended changes over the line? And it doesn't matter whether you're in office or not. It's for the next president to also think about what are the potential pitfalls here in trying to implement these changes.
Unmute. Sorry, President.
You're on mute.
Sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Hewitt, how much time do you have? I hope you're not being mischievous, but I think what makes this report, first of all, you're absolutely right. A lot of it will redound to what happens with the players, right, when they are at home in their home territory, sort of under the semi under the umbrella of the territorial board. What happens to our players when they're not with the West Indies team to make them be more competitive and more prepared for when they come back to the West Indies team, and that they can start a few steps ahead of where they left off when they left the West Indies team. That is one of the biggest challenges anywhere in cricket in the West Indies. And a lot of work, certainly a lot of talk has taken place about that. And I could say more recently, a fair amount of work. As we speak right now, we just coming to the end of a wave of employment in the 6 territorial boards. I believe the Leewards have now completed theirs. They were the last group to put it together, where there is a physiotherapist and a strength and conditioning coach, what we call SNC, now thoroughly, properly credentialed and hired in the franchise in the territorial board. So the franchise has now professional coaches, professional medical and fitness related professionals at global standards, helping to prepare players when they're at home. The board approved that. If I remember correctly, the board approved that recommendation from our medical people, our medical panel and so on, probably 4 or 5 years ago, but can only now implement it because we have stabilized the financial system and in a position now to recruit where there is need for recruitment in the cricket side of things. So yeah, territorial boards, here's the other thing too. The report speaks to an issue that touches everybody in the Caribbean because everybody was distressed. Some still are. I could tell you what some of the letters and the calls that I still get. You know, our girls team that's really brand new in the business. We had the first girls tournament in 2019, and one territorial board didn't even have a team to participate. That's how far behind the world we've been. And then we had 2 pandemic years, and then we had, for the first time last year, we had for the second time last year, we had a tournament, but it was the first time with all 6 territorial boards. And then by about the middle of last year, we began preparing, right after the tournament, we began preparing this team that you see now in South Africa playing. We won our first 2 games, lost the 3rd one today. But here's the point. They lost the 3rd one, clearly outplayed, clearly mesmerized and not experienced enough to handle the enormity of the competition they face today. And really, it's better for them to have had a bad day today because they've already qualified into the 6s, the Super 6s, what they call the Super 6s. So if they were going to have a bad day, it was today. But guess what? If you know how many calls I got about how bad the girls did today, that is how West Indies cricket is. Nobody called me when we did well in the first 2 matches, except 1 or 2 staff in CWI who knew how committed and dedicated I have been to developing girls cricket. But the point is that because there's so much political pressure on the territorial boards all across the Caribbean, I'm confident that there's common commitment and desire to carry out the cricket-related improvements that they can, afford and that they can make easy mileage on, as compared to the Webby report. The Webby report is about the board, and the board, some members of the board may not really believe that they're not performing well, whereas the cricketers are clearly not performing as well as the Caribbean expects us to perform. And so it's whose fault is it, And it's very easy to point fingers, but what this very comprehensive and analytical report is doing is basically pointing fingers everywhere and saying what, surprise, surprise, we all somehow never knew, that it takes a team approach. It takes a village, and all stakeholders need to be on board with this, including the territorial boards.
Thank you very much, Ricky. Justice Thompson, just one for you. Earlier on, my colleague Jerome Foster spoke to you about the players, etc., and differences in opinion. And I know you can't speak about individual players, nor do I want you to. But I noted that in one of the points you said that one of the few areas where everybody agreed was, I think it was the point about practice in the middle, not in the nets, but actual practice in the middle. And I noted that, but I guess I also wanted to understand where were the areas of biggest disagreement. And that's not me trying to sow discord. The reason why I'm answering that question is because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So administrators can't know what players are really thinking, and players can't really know what administrators are really thinking, and so on and so forth. So what were some of the areas you picked up on that possibly both sides of the coin didn't fully understand? That's where either side was coming from. So I guess you might call it, I don't know what you might call it. Maybe that's enough for you to kind of dig into there.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I have to say, as you were asking the question, I was trying to formulate and think in my mind, because I have my notes of the consultations in front of me, exactly what these areas of, I suppose, disagreement were. And I wouldn't phrase them, and I hope you don't think I'm splitting hairs. It's less a matter of disagreement, and I think it's more a matter of perspective and expectations. I think the players have one perspective, and the, I guess, management, and when I say management, I'm talking about Cricket West Indies as opposed to the coaches who are with them on a daily basis. I think it's a matter of perspective. What the players perceive and believe is their reality, and what management perceives when they see the output on the field is their reality. And that's why we suggested a sort of meeting of the minds, that retreat, to sort of bridge that gap, as opposed to saying there are these massive areas, or I added massive, but they're not these areas, I would say, of discord. And I'll give you an example. I think both players and management really care about West Indies and West Indies cricket and wanting it to succeed. I know that might sound obvious, but I think sometimes fans believe that, look, these players, they're not trying their best, clearly they're not doing their best. But I have to say that the players were, as a man, extremely disappointed and took the poor performances to heart, so that it's a matter of judging, as it were, that perception. A fan or even an executive might feel, oh, come on, this person is not as committed. But the players are, in fact, committed. And I think it's just a matter of the structural changes, as opposed to massive areas of disagreement. And just to answer your question about that example, read the center wickets, I pinned it together because it just came out, as it were. It wasn't a lot of players or a lot of coaches who said so, but it struck me that it would be something that both of these separate groups would both say, yes, this is important. We do better when we have center wicket practice, was something coming from both sides of the court. I hope I've answered your question Michelle. I know it's a lot of words, but I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. There wasn't the sort of discord, I suppose, that one may have expected, just as an outsider. It's just a matter of providing the structural support to ensure good performance going forward, is how I would put it.
Thank you very much. Dario, is it time for one more, or are you wrapping this up now?
Proceed. You're on the floor.
All right, I'll do one more then, and Ricky or the Justice can take it. And the last thing I noted in the report, there wasn't really much said about coaching, and that's not for me to directly reference Phil or any of the coaches, but there wasn't really that much said about coaching and or the lack thereof, or how good it was, or whatever it might be. And I guess what I'm picking at here then is, was that to say that this performance or poor performance was bigger than anything to do with coaching, and that you could have put any coach in that situation and you possibly may still be having the same kind of output because of the myriad of factors that are involved? Were there any key takeaways with regards to coaching?
Right. No, I don't think there were, as I say, key takeaways as to coaching, because the purpose of the review is to look, as we say at the start of the report, at paragraph 4, a sort of black box analysis. It'd be very unfair to just pick at the coach and say, right, the coach was a bad coach, the batting coach was bad, this failed, etc. We're talking about 3 matches of which we won 1 and lost 2. So if you just jump at the coach and say the coaching was substandard or poor, I think you're unfair to the coach if that's the tack that you take. Now, you've only seen the executive summary, but of course we consulted with all of the coaches, and we have the players' feedback as well, which no doubt you'll see in summary when you see the full report. But there wasn't, from memory, much said about any inadequacies or specific deficiencies with the coaching that was provided to them. I think coaching in international sport certainly ought to be more about motivation and tactics as opposed to technical skills. So that if any other coach would have created the same result, I mean, it's hard to say, what would have happened with someone else. But certainly, it wouldn't be fair of us, I think, in the review. And perhaps it helped that Mickey Arthur was there as a coach. It'd be very unfair to go after coaches or coaching as a sort of hatchet man review to say the coaching on any level was poor. I think the players actually, on reflection, were disappointed in their performance. And I have to give them credit for not seeking to scapegoat the coaching in any way, or to even point to any deficiencies. Certainly from memory, I don't recall very many references to any sort of coaching failures, if I could call it that way. And I guess it's a more fulsome thing. I mean, what does one expect coaches to do at an international level? They can only do so much, and then the 11 take the field, and then it's bat v ball, you know what I mean? The captain is, as it were, the coach on the field to make sure that the plans are implemented. That's how I would put it, at least, to you. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Michelle. Sajil, I do see the raised hand, but unfortunately, I don't want to get myself in trouble. I see that it went down as well, so hopefully you would have gotten your answer out of Michelle's question. I promised myself that I wouldn't hold the Justice and the President for an hour, and we're swiftly approaching that. But I know that they were very eager to have this press conference. They were very eager to answer these questions and add some context to that document that you guys would have received today. As the President mentioned, the full document will be made available as well. But I think even in what we've gotten so far, there's quite the noteworthy set of recommendations that we see can push Cricket West Indies forward in the near, medium, and long terms. So on behalf of Cricket West Indies, again, I just want to say thank you to all of the media pool that have taken time out to be here with us this evening and be on this call. Justice, firstly, just Patrick Thompson. And firstly, I'd like to say thank you to yourself on behalf of Cricket West Indies for not only going through the process and ensuring that you bring out this report for the cricket public and for the region, but also for joining this session and answering the questions ever so eloquently. President Skerritt, thank you for being here as well. You would have also added significant context to some of the answers from the Justice, and we very much appreciate it. I'm sure that the media pool share the same sentiments. And on behalf of your team here at Cricket West Indies, we want to say thank you as well. If either of you would like to have final words, please feel free to unmute your microphone and do so.
Sure, thank you so much. I have to say, I thought perhaps Michael Bascom from Grenada might have had a question. I'm presuming it's Michael Bascom, the sportscaster from Grenada, but I suppose he would not know that I am a Grenadian. But I suppose that that's entirely a matter for him. I'm not trying to get on GBN News or whatever, but that's entirely a matter for him as to what he wishes to do. But I certainly enjoyed and took great pride in taking part in an exercise of this nature. I'm sorry, I wasn't picking on Michael. He was a sportscaster since I was very young, so I thought perhaps, that he would have chimed in. But these are the things that happen. I hope he doesn't feel picked on. But there we go. Thank you so much, President Skerritt and Mr. Moderator, and all of you other journalists for your questions and for allowing me to be a part of this process. I don't think I could have foreseen that I would have had anything to do with anything of this nature 10, 15, 20, even 5 years ago. This would have been beyond my wildest dreams. Sure, it's all well and good to have opinions like a fan, but to work in such distinguished company, Brian Lara, who needs no introduction, and Mickey Arthur, who's had sustained success with, by my count, 4 international teams, was a real honor and a privilege. And I'm hoping that the recommendations, and even if the recommendations don't take fruit, I am hoping, like all other fans do, that we see sustained improvement in our performance in this year and beyond. That's all I could hope for. So thank you very much.
Well, if I can just add quickly in closing, again, my gratitude on behalf of the board to and our vice president, to the review group chaired by Justice Thompson for the excellent effort and the amazing outcome that just seems to capture all of the elements of improvement that need to be followed through with. I commit again to, remember, I was the person who called for this report. Some people thought I was trying to duck some bullets or something, but you have to understand that this has never happened before. It certainly has never happened this way. It's been talked about in the past, but we were blessed that we found the right threesome at the right time. And they got very willing support from the various interviewees. They had to be at all hours in different time zones. So you have to understand that it was not easy to put together. There's a young man from Cricket West Indies who was assigned to the Justice, Linford Inverary, who is an incredible young man who has helped to keep the Justice producing outside of his very busy and demanding schedule. The reason why we had to have this press conference at this late afternoon hour was because of the judge and his schedule in court. So it's been a voluntary, by and large, a voluntary effort, and I thank all involved. The way forward is only now beginning, in the sense that although it mentions many things that are already being touched on or that will already be in the pipeline, as we say politically, it puts things in perspective. It's an analytical approach. It's a strategic set of recommendations. It's not an ordinary to-do list. A lot of things overlap and intersperse, and we already put it before our executive committee that question, just like you did today, question the judge. And I think the judge's role now in making it public is going to be crucial. There will be some more media outings for him if he agrees, I would say, because I certainly don't have control over his time. But I think I warned the justice that he was going to become a little bit of a star because everybody will be asking him questions. And I also confirmed to him that I wasn't trying to get him to take the bullets or the stones that were meant for me. I thank him for his support, but he's certainly not a bodyguard. So, Justice, thank you again. Thank you to all those who joined us today. It's been a pleasure. I made it my business not to speak to any of the media until this report came out. I'm sorry, I must apologize again to those who tried to reach me and I just wasn't available. But I was so hesitant to speak about anything related to West Indies cricket that I don't somehow, interfere or appear to be interfering with the work of the committee. They're completely independent. There's been absolutely no input from myself or any of our directors in the work that they have carried out. So thank you to all again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you.